Jim was singing Moonlight Drive, alone on Venice Beach, when a voice from his past stopped him mid-song. What happened next stunned two people and changed rock music forever. So, do you think one encounter can rewrite music history? July 1965. The sand beneath Morrison's bare feet was hot. He was 22 years old, homeless, a recent graduate of UCLA film school, writing poems and songs that no one had heard. As he sang without telling anyone, the Pacific waves crashed behind him, but none of them knew that his old classmate, Ray Manzarek, was walking on the same beach. Ray stopped 10 meters away. He listened. He recognized that voice. 26-year-old Ray Manzarek was searching for something. His blues band had broken up. The music scene felt empty, meaningless. He had walked that beach hundreds of times looking for a purpose. Those words, that darkness in his voice, Ray would say later. I knew within 5 seconds we had to form a band. His brothers Rick and Jim had told him to find new members, but he had found something better, a poet who could sing. Ray approached. Morrison stopped singing. The two old classmates looked at each other. Ray noticed the change in Morrison's eyes. The quiet, shy student from UCLA was gone, replaced by someone else. Sharper, more intense, more dangerous. Morrison's hair was long, his skin sunburned, his clothes dirty and torn. But there was something in his eyes. A hunger, a fire. Ray recognized that fire because he felt the same fire himself. How Morrison ended up in Venice Beach was another layer of the story. He had graduated from UCLA in June, but hadn't even told his family during the graduation ceremony. His mother, father, and siblings were in Florida, and Jim hadn't told them what his son was doing in California because he didn't know himself. For 3 weeks, he slept on rooftops, stayed a few nights at friends' houses, and finally settled on the roof of a friend's apartment in Venice Beach. On that roof, listening to the sound of the Pacific Ocean, Morrison wrote 12 hours a day. Poems, songs, thoughts, visions. Some made sense, some were chaotic, but they all came from somewhere deep. Morrison was undergoing a transformation on that roof, and he wasn't even aware of it. But Ray noticed. When Morrison asked him, "What are you doing?" Ray asked a counter-question. "What are you doing, Jim?" Morrison paused. Then he smiled. It was a strange, sad smile. "I'm writing songs," he said. Ray waited. "Sing me one." That was the moment. Perhaps the most important 5 minutes in Venice Beach history began. Morrison started singing again. The darkness in his voice shook Ray because that darkness was familiar. Morrison was talking about moonlight, underwater, disappearing, diving into the ocean. The words were poetry, but rock and roll poetry. There was the depth of the blues, but there was also something else. Something psychedelic, mysterious, dangerous. As Ray listened, keyboards began playing in his head. Bass lines, organ melodies, rhythm. As Morrison sang, Ray heard in his mind how that song would be played. And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't just a song. This was a manifesto. When Morrison finished, Ray was silent for 5 seconds. Then he said, "Jim, we need to start a rock band." Morrison looked at him, skeptically. "I'm not a singer," he said. Ray laughed. "You're a rock and roll singer. You just don't know it yet." That conversation continued at Venice Beach. Ray told Morrison about the band he played in with his brothers Rick and Jim Manzarek, called Rick and the Ravens. The band played blues, but Ray was tired of blues. He wanted something else, something darker, deeper, more dangerous. Morrison told him about other songs. There was a song called Break On Through. There was another song called The End. As Ray listened to each one, he could hear in his head how the whole band would play. But there was a problem. They didn't have a bass guitarist. Ray said he could play the bass line on the keyboards, bass with his left hand, organ with his right. Morrison was skeptical, but Ray was determined. "I can do it," he said. And he did. But getting the band together wasn't easy. For the first few months, Morrison hardly spoke. During rehearsals, while the rest of the band played the songs, Morrison would turn his back and stare at the wall. He would sing into the microphone, but not look at anyone. Ray understood this strange behavior because he knew Morrison was shy, but he also sensed something else. Morrison was creating a persona for the stage, and that persona wasn't ready yet. In August, the band found Robbie Krieger. The 19-year-old guitarist played a mix of flamenco and blues. He meditated. He was calm and quiet. When Morrison and Krieger first saw each other, they didn't speak, but they connected musically instantly. Krieger's guitar perfectly complemented Morrison's voice. It was dark but melodic, aggressive but beautiful. In September, John Densmore joined. The 21-year-old drummer came from a jazz background, but wanted to play rock. Densmore was shocked when he first heard Morrison because his voice was unlike anything else. Deep, baritone-like, almost theatrical. When Densmore heard that voice, he imagined tribal drum beats in his head. Primitive, shamanic. Morrison wasn't a rock singer. He was a shaman. In October, the group found its name. Morrison had read William Blake and Aldous Huxley at UCLA. Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception, had a profound effect on Morrison's mind. The doors of perception, the doors of the subconscious. Morrison suggested the group be called The Doors. The Doors. Everyone agreed because it was perfect. It wasn't just a name, it was a philosophy. The music would open these doors. The audience would walk through them, and no one knew what was on the other side. Do you think if Ray Manzarek hadn't gone to the beach that day, there would have been a band called The Doors? In November, the band played their first concert. It was at a small club called London Fog. The stage was 1 square meter. There were 5 people in the audience. When Morrison went on stage, he was shaking. He couldn't hold the microphone. His voice cracked as he sang. In the middle of the concert, he forgot a song. Densmore stopped playing the drums and looked at him. Ray kept playing the keyboards. Krieger kept playing the guitar. Morrison closed his eyes. He took a deep breath and moved on to another song, as if nothing had happened. In that moment, part of Morrison's stage persona was born. Chaos, unpredictability, danger. London Fog continued for months. The band played every night. Every night, Morrison changed a little more. He learned to hold the microphone. He learned to use the stage. He learned to use his body. But most importantly, he learned to control the audience. When Morrison looked at the audience, he hypnotized them, with his eyes, with his voice, with his movements. As the audience watched Morrison, they felt like they were going somewhere else, somewhere darker, somewhere more dangerous, and they loved it. In January 1966, the Whiskey A Go-Go hired the band. Whiskey A Go-Go was one of the most famous clubs on the Sunset Strip. The Byrds, Love, Buffalo Springfield, they had all played at Whiskey. Now it was the Doors' turn. But there was a problem. The Doors weren't the main act. They were the opening act. The main act was Kim Fowley's band, and Fowley hated the Doors. "Who listens to a band that plays such slow music?" he said. But the audience listened. Every night the Doors took the stage, the crowd grew. Every night Morrison got a little more dangerous. He was a little more unpredictable. One night, while playing the end, Morrison lay down in the middle of the stage. He lay there silently and sang the rest of the song. The audience didn't know what to do. Some applauded. Some watched silently. Some were scared. But none of them forgot. In March, Morrison changed the end again. This time it was darker. Much darker. Morrison added an Oedipal section in the middle of the song, killing his father, raping his mother. Words from the depths of the Freudian dark subconscious. As Morrison sang that night, the owner of Whiskey A Go-Go stood backstage. When the song ended, he came out on stage and fired the Doors right then and there. "You won't play in this club again," he said. Ray was furious. Densmore was shocked. Krieger waited silently. Morrison just smiled. That strange, sad smile. "We're free," he said. But their freedom was short-lived, because Jack Holtzman from Elektra Records had seen the Doors a week earlier that night. Holtzman was one of rock history's greatest producers, and he knew it the moment he saw Morrison. This wasn't just a singer, this was a phenomenon. Holtzman offered the band a recording contract. 6 albums. 3 years. The Doors accepted. In August 1966, the band began recording their first album. The Sunset Sound Recorders studio was small and hot. Morrison hated recording because he loved the energy of live performance. The studio was cold and sterile. But producer Paul Rothchild found a way to put Morrison at ease. He turned off the lights. He made the studio dark. He gave Morrison whiskey. And Morrison began singing in the dark. His voice came out strong. It came out deep. It came out dangerous. Rothchild knew as he listened to the recordings, this album was going to be special. In January 1967, the Doors album was released. The first week was quiet. The second week, radio stations started playing Break On Through. The third week, the album sold thousands of copies. The fourth week, Elektra Records noticed something. The 7-minute song, Light My Fire, was too long for radio. The band refused to shorten it. Elektra's marketing department cut it down to 3 minutes. Morrison was angry. Ray was angry. But Elektra released the song as a single. In May 1967, Light My Fire started playing on the radio. It was number 47 on the Billboard charts in its first week, number 31 in its second week, number 16 in its third week, number 7 in its fourth week. In July, exactly 23 months after that encounter at Venice Beach, Light My Fire reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. What Morrison called 9 months was actually 2 years, but the outcome remained the same. 2 UCLA students, a Venice Beach encounter, and a song. Now it was America's number 1 song. But success changed Morrison, or success unleashed something within Morrison. In July, the group appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. The Ed Sullivan producers told Morrison to change a controversial word in the song, Light My Fire. Morrison agreed. But during the live broadcast, in front of millions of viewers, Morrison said that word. He didn't change it. Ed Sullivan was furious. The Doors never appeared on that show again. But Morrison didn't care. "Television wants censorship. We give freedom," he said. In August, Morrison returned to Venice Beach. Alone. It was midnight. He walked along the beach. He tried to find the spot where he had met Ray, but he couldn't remember. It had been 2 years ago, and Morrison was a different person now. He was famous. Rich. Famous. But unhappy. Sitting on the beach, he thought about that day. He thought about the look on Ray's face. Let's form a group. It was that simple. That pure. Now everything was complicated. Success, fame, pressure, expectations. Morrison made a decision that night on Venice Beach. The group's next album would be different. Darker, more dangerous, more honest. The Strange Days album was released in November, and Morrison was right. It was darker. 1968 changed Morrison even more. In March, Martin Luther King was assassinated. In June, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The Vietnam War was heating up. America was burning. And Morrison fueled the fire. In the song 5 to 1, Morrison sang, They got the guns, but we got the numbers. They have the guns, but we have the numbers. Morrison was no longer a rock singer. He was a political figure, a dangerous figure. But the real danger was inside Morrison. Alcohol was slowly destroying him. He drank more at every concert. He drank more in every interview. He drank more at every recording session. The band members were worried, but they didn't know what to do. Morrison was spiraling out of control. In March 1969, at a concert at the Dinner Key Auditorium in Miami, Morrison completely lost control. He came on stage drunk. He cursed at the audience. He started to undress. The police raided the venue. Morrison was arrested. The scandal made national news. Morrison went to court. He was found guilty. He received a 6-month prison sentence. The Doors' career was over, or so it seemed. But Ray didn't give up. He didn't forget that day in Venice Beach. He didn't forget Morrison's voice. The band recorded one more album. Morrison Hotel was simpler. It was more bluesy. Morrison's voice was more tired, but deeper. The album was released in February 1970, and critics were shocked. The Doors were back. They were stronger. In March 1971, Morrison moved to Paris. He was running away from music. He was running away from fame. He was running away from himself. "I want to be a poet," he told Ray, "not a rock star." Ray understood. Morrison wanted to return to the person he was at Venice Beach, the singing poet. On the 3rd day of July 1971, Morrison died in Paris. He was 27 years old. The official report was heart failure. But there was no autopsy. The real cause was never known. When Ray heard the news, he went to Venice Beach. He sat there. He thought about where he had met Morrison. "Let's start a band." 6 words. It changed rock history. Today, millions of people visit Morrison's grave at Père Lachaise Cemetery every year. They sing songs there. They read poetry. They remember Morrison. But Ray always remembers Morrison at Venice Beach. That hot July day. Those 5 minutes. That song. And that decision. Let's start a band. Because sometimes a meeting changes everything. Sometimes a song rewrites history. And sometimes words spoken on a beach echo forever.